Hi, my name is Charlotte, and this channel is about my attempt to become moderately competent at drawing. Today's video is a sketchbook tour, and it's quite long and chatty. If you prefer more of a short, silent flip through, I recorded one of those as well, and you can see that video at the first link in the description box below. If you're still here, welcome. This is my third sketchbook tour. I previously made a video about my unnumbered beginner sketchbooks and also about Sketchbook 1. This video is about Sketchbook 3. Obviously, I skipped over Sketchbook 2, mostly because I didn't really have anything positive to say about it when I finished it. However, both for completeness and because being disappointed in this sketchbook really changed how I worked in my third sketchbook, I'm going to put a quick flip through on the screen right now while I explain why I felt negatively about it. There are three main reasons. The first is that I just didn't enjoy working in the physical sketchbook at all, and that soured my opinion on the sketchbook when I was finished with it. You might have noticed that Sketchbook 1 and 2 are identical. I bought a pack of 2 of these square blue Arteza sketchbooks. When I finished the first of them after Sketchbook 1, I thought the paper was okay, but I didn't love it. By the time I was no more than a quarter of the way through Sketchbook 2, I actively disliked the paper, and I found I was constantly irritated when I worked in it. To be clear, I'm not saying that the paper made my art bad or anything like that. I just didn't like it. Not the yellowish ivory color, not the texture. The only real technical problem I had with it was that I found it shed little fibers and sometimes clogged up my pens. If this happened now, I just abandon the sketchbook and move on to something I liked better. But at the time, for some reason, I thought it was more important to finish the sketchbook than to enjoy using it. And unfortunately, the legacy of that is that I wasted a lot of time on a sketchbook I probably wasn't ever going to like. The second reason is that because I didn't want to draw in my sketchbook, but I did want to finish it, I ended up using a lot of pages for notes. So I do take a lot of notes because that has been and probably always will be an important aspect of how I learn. But the concentration of notes here meant that the sketchbook ended up looking more like a notebook with occasional drawings rather than a sketchbook with occasional notes. And that was really not what I intended or wanted from this sketchbook. So these two problems were really easy to fix for my third sketchbook, but the third problem is much less simple to resolve. In the period when I was using this sketchbook, which was from July 22 to October 23, I was still pretty new to drawing and I was learning a lot. But there was not a lot of that learning or any improvement reflected in the pages of this sketchbook. Of course, this is not a universal requirement of sketchbooks, but it was my goal with this sketchbook. So I was disappointed not only not to see any progress, but once I'd finished, to realize that I hadn't really given myself very many opportunities to improve within this sketchbook. And I actually had to think for quite a while before I figured out how to make Sketchbook 3 more successful in this respect. So that's Sketchbook 2. Let's consign it to history. When I started Sketchbook 3, I made sure to solve those two easy problems straight away. First, I picked a different brand of sketchbook where I already knew I really liked the paper. This is the Seawhite 19.5 centimeter square chunky sketchbook, so called on their website because it has 95 sheets, 190 pages. When I first bought it, the size of it, the number of pages was a real selling point, but over time I came to discover that I probably prefer a thinner sketchbook. This one is quite heavy, and it was quite awkward to use in the first, say, 10% and last 10% of the pages because it didn't really stay open properly while I was drawing. I also found that even though I'm not a very heavy user of sketchbooks, I'm not someone who's, throwing it in a bag every day. I'm mostly using it at my desk in my home. The binding still started to fall apart by the time I was 75% of the way through. So if you are someone who's hard on your sketchbooks, I don't know that the binding will outlive the number of pages. The second problem was taking too many notes, and that's easy to fix just by telling yourself not to take so many notes. I actually ended up giving myself another sketchbook, this Seawhite B5 sketchbook, just to take notes in. And that was really successful in the sense that I wasn't really tempted to take notes in this one. There's maybe 7 or 8 pages of notes in total in here, usually from days when I was too lazy to walk across the room and pick up the other sketchbook. So I was pretty happy to have solved those two problems with Sketchbook 2. But the problem of how to come to the end of this sketchbook and feel like I had made a real effort to improve was harder to figure out. And it's probably easier to show you what I did while I'm turning the pages. So as I said, I worked on this from mid-October 23 to early October 24, so it took almost a year. I really took to heart some of those instructions to give yourself an ugly first page. So I just put some blobs and stuck in some figure drawings. This is my 300-hour figure drawing. I'll link a video about that in the description box. But basically, I keep track of the hours that I spend working on the figure. You'll see my 400, 500, and 600-hour drawing later in the book as well. This was just a page messing around with some colored pencils just to get used to the paper, and with some ink gel pens as well. And then just some notes on the anatomy of dogs, or how to draw dogs. I didn't actually spend that much time doing figure drawing in this book. There's a dozen pages maybe in total. And the reason for that is that I found the format of the page just too small for figure drawing. This, though, is using a reference from a site called Bodies in Motion, which I really recommend if you're at all interested in drawing sequences. Most of the models are dancers, athletes, people doing parkour and martial arts, things like that. And I really enjoy doing this. This was my first ever attempt at this. I did actually get better at it later, but I enjoy this kind of frame by frame drawing. Some dogs. So this is all that remains of an ill-fated attempt to make my sketchbook partly into a travel journal. I had to go to London for an appointment first thing on Monday morning, and I decided I would add on some days and spend the weekend there. Unfortunately, I only did one of my planned activities, which was going to Kew Gardens, as these postcards depict. These ones are by an artist called Freya Hutton, and I was immediately then very ill and remained very ill for the next 3 weeks. So what this actually commemorates for me is a terrible trip and a nightmarish journey home when I felt extremely ill. And I didn't touch my sketchbook. This was the 2nd of December. I didn't touch it again until the 23rd because I was just really ill for several weeks. This is my parents' dog, Bear, who is a Lakeland Terrier. I have a number of these pages. This is actually based on something that I saw on Pinterest by an artist. I'll put her an image of hers on the screen so you can see what I was inspired by. There's quite a few of these pages because I just found them enjoyable as a doodle. For now, I'll just say, there's a doodle here. So this was the point where I really started to get to grips with the idea of drawing in order to improve. I was towards the very end of December working on drawing these bugs in my sketchbook. This is a subject I've drawn before. And I was thinking as I did these drawings about how I could actually improve beyond where I was. And one of the things that I realized was that in order to get better, I was going to have to make myself uncomfortable. So I was going to have to, in order to make this whole sketchbook successful, in the sense of seeing improvement, seeing change over time, there were going to have to be days where individual drawings, whole spreads of the sketchbook were complete failures in order that I could then have successes based on what I'd learned later on. So it was quite a mind shift change of thinking like not every page has to work out, not every drawing has to work out, and actually those drawings that don't work are still pretty valuable. And this is the first time I was really trying that, where I kept drawing bugs, but I started to do things that I found more difficult. So adding color, trying to make the beetle look shiny, things like that. And so none of these are particularly successful, but I did learn quite a lot from them. And some more of those efforts. This is my first ever attempt to make my own lino cut pattern. I had been given a lino cut kit for Christmas from a family member, and I had tried out with just some stencils that I already had. So this is somebody else's design. And then I went back and tried to make my own design. And the first thing that I did, because I'd been drawing all these beetles, was a little beetle print. These are just some notes. This is one of those times when I was too lazy to go get my other sketchbook. And then I was, again, trying to do things that I found difficult. So I was trying to draw some skulls. I was trying to simplify hair, which is something I still struggle with now. So this doesn't really look like it necessarily, but it is actually a freehand perspective exercise. So this is in 1-point perspective. The vanishing point is here. And then I was trying to freehand all of the shelves and the items on the shelves. And the story behind it was I had watched this video of somebody doing a shelfscape, like this interior decorating thing where people try to put all their favorite things on a shelf to talk about who they are as a person. And I was sort of imagining an evil witch who also enjoys interior decorating, putting together her shelfscape. And that was just, the little story I told myself to give myself some specific items to draw. So I was really pleased with how this came out. The perspective isn't perfect, but I don't think it's bad for freehand. So I don't think you look at it and think, oh, I can see 50,000 perspective errors straight away, even though there are some wobbly lines in there. This was just seeing how watercolor worked on these pages, which is not great. This is not a good sketchbook if you want to do water-based painting. And then I just did some colored pencil fruit over the top of the painting. It's another doodle. So this is a double experiment. I had seen a video about how German art students have to tone their pages using black ink, very light washes of black ink. And I thought it looked interesting, so I decided to do the same with a light wash of sepia ink, and then I drew over it. And the second part of the experiment was actually doing these continuous line drawings of the same dead leaf that I found in my garden, which makes these interesting sort of curled up shapes when it dies and gets dry. So I just kind of enjoyed doing that actually, and thought it made an interesting page. This was a birthday card I made for my mom, and due to a shipping error, they actually sent me two by mistake, so I have a copy of the original as well. This is what it turned out like. The backstory being that my parents' dog is obsessed with fish, so I drew a fish balloon, and then like on the back of the card it looks like the dog has eaten the fish balloon, which probably would actually happen. So then just some continuous line skulls, and this is further efforts. It's hard to see on this page because of the blue pencil that I used. I was again trying to do two things at once, both practice heads in 3/4 view and practice these simplified hair shapes. There's a lot of these because I got into this like a few a day portrait drawing phase, which you'll see over the next several pages. This is some simple lino cut tile designs, which I got interested in. Some more heads and hair. Some more, one of those doodles. Oh, this doll, which I was doing that thing where people say, oh, you should draw from life. So I found this doll on my shelf. I don't know anything about her. I don't remember ever receiving her. I've had her as long as I can remember. And I don't even know what country or region's dress this is supposed to be, but there she is, and I drew her. And then some more heads. This is the first of quite a lot of content from Sophie McPike. So Sophie McPike is an Australian YouTuber and artist, and she does these sessions here on YouTube live. I usually watch them on catch up because of the time zone, but she puts together a series of references on a theme. This theme was a curio cabinet, so all these like little doohickeys and knickknacks that people collect in a cabinet, and you get about 2 minutes for each of the drawings. So none of the drawings turn out particularly well in 2 minutes, but it was interesting for me to try to draw straight into colored pencil, to try to color in quickly. I think the only one that actually came out was this one little deer, although I also enjoyed doing the stopper of this bottle. Some more head shapes. Again, this background thing, this is something that Sophie McPike does. She calls it pre-blobinating the pages, and I quite enjoyed it, but I didn't do it very often, and I don't think it's something I'm ever going to like fully embrace. But because I'd enjoyed drawing that one glass bottle, I drew some more the next day. And this is the last page of hair shapes, just trying to simplify haircuts. Some more lino cut planning, and the design is over leaf. This is my second sort of set of portraits, so there's 25 of these in total. This is where I was just trying to draw the basic structure and then a simple two-value statement, so light and dark. And as is often the case in this, the first page actually turned out best. This is that lino cut tile print. Unfortunately, the ink sheds everywhere, so it has to be all covered up. But this is the tile I was actually using. Some more value practice heads and some more. This was just some comfort sketching. I just wanted to draw something easy, and I found a Pinterest board full of ancient pottery and little knickknacks that people had found on archaeological digs, plus this one Norse horse, well, modern horse with little stumpy legs, who is probably my favorite thing on this page. Some more of these value portraits, another of these doodles. This is another sort of comfort sketching of weird knickknacks. And this is some more of those value portraits on another toned paper. This is another Sophie McPike. It's really hard to see, but it's just some figure drawing. This really confirmed to me that I don't want to draw the figure in the sketchbook because the page is just too small for it for me. I ended up drawing, this is one of those knickknacks from a couple of pages ago. This one in the top corner, I decided to draw it again, and I ended up with this little sad monster, which I then drew about 45 million times all over the place. He doesn't really appear that much more in this sketchbook, but every other sketchbook I have 1,000 of them. Some more of this doodle, and here we get on to finally like whole portraits. And as before, this is my favorite page of all of the ones that I did. If I could just move his mouth up like 2 millimeters, it would be even better. But this was me just trying to put together all the things that I learned in the previous sections. This is just some notes about drawing cartoon heads. I was watching a class on schoolism about speed sketching animals where you take the same references and you draw them in 1, 2, and 5 minutes. I actually like how all the 5-minute ones turn out, but especially this one goofy looking corgi is very cute. Some more portraits. I really only like this one, and it isn't a good likeness at all. This is another Sophie McPike Scribble Brigade. This is what she calls her live sessions. This was extremely optimistic of me to think that I was going to be able to sketch, ink, and watercolor these all in 5 minutes each. I think these took a little longer, like 7 and 10 minutes. But you can see the result of me trying to go quickly is that everything leans slightly to the left, which is my worst sketching habit when I'm in a hurry. So really good fun, but the end result is not pretty. It's just fun to do. This is my 400-hour figure drawing thing. I don't love this, but I do like the fact that they look like they're playing tug of war off screen. It's kind of fun. The last of these dotty doodles. Some more faces. Again, for some reason I only ever like the one on the left. And some more. None of these I like. This is another attempt at that quick sketching animals, but they started to come out increasingly cartoon-like, which I didn't really like. And this is the last of the portraits that I did for the time being, and I actually didn't come back to portraiture in this sketchbook. This is another lino cut, and it's a complex tile, so that when you tile it, it makes up a bigger pattern. I'm not actually good enough at the lino cut part of it to make the pattern look good in the end, but I did enjoy doing it. It was a lot of fun trying to think up a model and then trying to cut the tile to make it do the right thing. So this is where my sketchbook got a little bit out of order. I got really sick for a couple of months and had to take some time off, and I started this, again, Sophie McPike thing, which is called an idea generator, which is where you rule out 100 of these squares and then you fill each with an idea that you come up with quickly. So I started this, and then the next day I got really sick, and when I came back to it weeks later, I couldn't remember what I was doing, and it didn't really appeal to me either. So I ended up just ignoring it, and I used the squares for other things. So this is just, again, some doodles. And this little character design exercise. So you take a really simple character, and I was using children's toys because children's toys are made of these really simple shapes, and then trying to turn it into a little character that you turn around and make it do different things. So I had this little bear. I actually really like this pose. I think it's very storybook. And then this little dragon, and I really like this one. A lot of the others, a lot of them aren't great because I'm just trying to figure out the perspective and whatnot, but I do think it's quite fun to do if you ever are looking for something. Just find a toy store online and start drawing toys because they're always really simple. And here's another one, it's just an alien and some doodles. I like my alien least. And this was several months earlier. I had actually done these original drawings. So this was like the end of February, and the ones that you just saw were done in May. So that was the big gap while I was ill. I have this little robot character that I draw a lot, and I wanted to make him some friends, and I ended up with these 3 being my favorite little friends to make him. This is the same plant that I drew before, the crunched up leaf. This is what it looks like when it's alive. There's a big one outside my house, which is why I was drawing it. It's a Fatsia japonica. And then I got really into drawing feet. So there's a lot of feet. If you don't like feet, you're going to have to fast forward to this section. So I drew 100 of them in here, and then I drew another 500 elsewhere. A big doodle page. Okay, and this is one of those mindset shift pages. So to put this in context, there's an artist called Simone Grunwald. She goes by Schmo Draws online. And on her newsletter that she sends out, she includes this little prompt for the week, which is usually like an animal or a topic. And she attaches it to a Pinterest board where she puts 5, maybe 6 references to draw over the week. And then at the end of the week, she sends out the next prompt and also a photo of her sketch page. So the first time I saw this was the week that she was doing squirrels. So I drew some squirrels and I was actually quite pleased with it because this took me a really long time. I had never drawn squirrels before. I was struggling with some of the poses, which were more difficult. And I was pretty happy with what I'd done. Happy enough that the next day I came back and drew some more. You probably really can't see this one at the bottom, but that's probably the best one that I drew. Then the following week, she sent out the next list of prompts, and I was looking at her page and immediately compared my work to hers, which of course you shouldn't do, but I did anyway, and felt really bad because I had been really pleased with this page, and then I saw hers and realized, actually, I didn't do that good a job, certainly compared to what she had done, probably in 1/10 of the time as well. And because it made me feel bad, I honestly just closed my sketchbook and walked away. But I did come back to it a couple of days later, and I came back to it in a much more rational frame of mind. So I did 2 things. The first thing was to say to myself, what did, if anything, can I pick out some positives of the page that I drew? And I decided that there were really 3 things that I could pick out that were okay. The first was they are squirrels. They're recognizably, if not squirrels, rodents at least. The second thing was that the proportions that I put down are more or less correct. So the heads are about the right size for the body, the legs are about the right length for the body, and so on. And the third thing was I actually had a process that I followed for drawing something that I was completely unfamiliar with that worked. So I didn't know how to draw squirrels when I started. I went through my little process of constructing them using shapes and going big to small and all of that kind of thing that they teach you in various classes. And it did work. So those were all really positive things. And then I looked again at Simone Grunwald's version of the same drawing. And I asked myself, what had she done that I liked so much more than my own drawing? And the reason that I did this was I wanted to break myself out of a mindset where it was like, well, she's just sprinkling fairy dust on the page. She's doing something magical that I can't do. No, she's actually doing specific things to her drawings that I hadn't done that I could probably start to try to do at a minimum. So I obviously found, 6 or more things that she did that I didn't do. The main one being I just hadn't spent enough time finishing these drawings. And I used that the next time I came across one of her prompts. So in a few pages, you'll see the next one where I tried to incorporate what I'd learned from being really analytical about her stuff and not just dismissing it as, she's so good, I'm so bad, but really trying to understand what made her sketches better than mine in order to kind of improve myself. But I carried on drawing feet in the interim. These are actually studies, which is why they look different from my own drawings. These are mostly Bridgman. These are all Hampton, and these 3 are from a book by Jake Spicer. And that's the last of my feet. This is the next time that I drew from Schmo Draws prompts. So I was drawing birds. I had the advantage here that I had drawn birds before, but I was trying, in this case, the lesson that I took from her previous drawings was to try to put in more detail of the markings on the bird, to try and have more interior details, those kinds of things. So, and I just spent more time on it. So I was much happier with these drawings, although I still felt I had a lot of room for improvement. This was another attempt at Scribble Brigade, and this paper, I'm not a good watercolorist to begin with, but you definitely shouldn't try to tone the page with ink and then use water on color on top, because that was way too much for this paper. So here's some more Schmo Draws. She calls it the Cozy Art Club. These are her references that she picked out. So some more birds. What I dislike about this one is I ended up with these really smooth outlines, and that's not something that I really like. And then some deer, which I struggled with. You can probably see on the page my 40,000 attempts to erase it and start again. Just really found this very difficult. Just the shapes and getting things in 3/4 view, really hard. I drew some fish. This is another Schmo Draws one. I was sort of going back to her older ones that she had already finished. Unfortunately, my page design was so terrible, just like the fish left big blank spaces, that I was moved to fill them in with this sparkly watercolor, and it just makes it really difficult to look at the page. This was just some notes about drawing stylized faces, and this is my 500-hour figure drawing. Oops. This is based on a class by Onmar Wynn on Skillshare, which really didn't work, not least because this paper does not like Posca pens. It just rips it straight up. This is a page full of watercolor and I guess fine liner drawings, and I enjoyed doing it, but when I came to the end I wished I had done better about picking my colors, because these two in particular just stand out like a sore thumb. So this was a lot of fun, but it wasn't necessarily the most exciting outcome. Also the watercolor on this page is terrible, so bad that I ended up covering it up with this random pieces of... I do a lot of figure drawings, so I just had these random figure drawings on blue paper lying around that I stuck in, not because they're anything particularly special. This was some notes on isometric perspective. This is another Schmo Draws. Again, the world's worst page design with big blank spaces. This was just drawing sneakers. Again, I was just trying to do more detail this time, so really get into the fine detail of the shoes. This was a watercolor experiment that was way more interesting in my head than on the paper. This was another Sophie McPike session. She does these themed sessions over like a whole month, and this month it was all mythical creatures. A lot of them don't turn out particularly well because I'm drawing them quickly and I don't know how to draw horses, so I was just kind of trying my best. I do like this rabbit bird thing that I drew. I made an attempt to draw with, or to color with, alcohol markers. So these are using Ohu markers. It turned out okay. I don't love it, but it wasn't a bad first try, I suppose. Some more mythical creatures. I don't know what this guy is, but I don't want to meet one. I had a long break from my sketchbook, and I was trying to get back into it just by kind of doing these doodles and these really easy pages, and also coming back and doing some more mythical creatures. I like this mask with just one ear and one wing, and some Moroccan tile doodles. And then some more mythical creatures, and I particularly like these weird goats. And because I had presumably been looking at Pinterest on weird goats, Pinterest then gave me pages full of weird ceramics that I decided to draw. My favorite being this very wacky looking elephant, which is actually many colored as well. It was a really great design. Some more doodles. This was something called the Art Hang. It's by Melissa Martin here on YouTube. She does these weekly live sessions. Again, I only watch them on catch up because she is in a different time zone to me, and the times that she does them at just don't really work for me. But this was 100 faces in 100 minutes, and these started off badly and just got more and more unhinged as time went on. And I was also drawing them in these rainbow pencils, which wear down really fast, so you end up drawing with them like it's like a stick in your hand. It's terrible. There's no point to the pencil is what I'm trying to say. So, but I did do 100 of them in 100 minutes, so that was okay. This was just some notes about something I was going to do. This is another Schmo Draws selection of references. I actually ran out of space for the fifth one. I wish this wasn't so big because it turned out really badly, but I really like how the other three turned out, so that was kind of a shame. If you've ever looked at any animation training, this might be familiar to you. This is the flour sack exercise, and I did it twice. The first time I drew this, and I did these very kind of rounded shapes, and then I read that you should really be trying to have like some rounded shapes directly opposite a straight. So I tried to redraw some of my first ones in that kind of straight versus curved approach. This is just a doodle. This was a Melissa Martin art hang, and again, I was wildly optimistic about what I could do in 2, 5, and 7 minutes, I think, which was I was trying to sketch, ink, and watercolor, and mix my colors in that time, and that was not enough time to do any of those things. This was another animation exercise, just taking a really simple character and trying to use body language with it. Swatch page, a doodle page. I was looking at landscapes, and so I did a series of exercises with landscapes over the next few pages. This was just trying to find silhouettes of shapes. And then values, which is much more well-known, which is where you just try to do light to dark. It didn't really work out. I was working in graphite, and I never think graphite gives you great options for getting values. And these were design thumbnails from a single view, which is the view from one of my windows. And then I was trying to like design it differently. Those are supposed to be cows. And this is another Schmo Draws. In fact, I think this is one of the last ones. And I just wanted, this is back to that idea about improvement or giving yourself opportunities to make progress. So I drew these 4 lizards, and I did struggle with them. I really struggled with this guy's head, for example. But I think comparing back to the squirrels, to the lizards, I can see a lot of improvement on just how I'm approaching, how I'm going to sketch, how I'm going to decide that I'm finished, things like that. So I was actually really happy with my page full of lizards. And then the next day I did some mice. Not all of them come out right. I struggle so much with those 3/4 faces. I wish I could figure out a better way to do it. This is another Sophie McPike thing. She did this section of classes on minimalist landscapes, which is where you just take like 2 colors in the white of the page and you try to produce these simple landscapes. I think most of these didn't really work. The only one I really like is this one here. The remainder just don't really work out very well. And that's pretty much, that's the standard, all of these pages full of them. There's usually like one that I think worked out and the rest are kind of junky, but it's a really fun exercise because you do each of these little squares in just 1 minute each. So you don't really have a lot of time to think, just draw. Some notes. This is my 600-hour figure drawing. So before you think that I suddenly got a lot better at everything, this is actually washi tape. It's a giant fall themed washi tape. I really love it, but I never have an excuse to use it anywhere because it's so big. So I decided to make a spread of it, and then I actually did draw these. These are just some pumpkins that I drew at a restaurant that I went to with my nephew. And figure drawing, these are all just swatch pages, so they're kind of junky. The back of the sketchbook got really messy. Some more feet. Should do that properly so you can actually see it. And then just some random bits and pieces here and there. At the beginning of the year, I was trying to learn to paint gouache, and I did these 3 little miniature paintings. They didn't turn out particularly well, but I needed somewhere to put them, so they ended up here. And I think that is it. So that was Sketchbook 3. I was really happy when I finished it. I felt like I could see the beginnings of that progress that I'd been looking for. And I was really pleased to have picked out this specific sketchbook. So Sketchbook 4 is another Seawhite sketchbook, but it's a thinner one with fewer pages, a slightly different form factor. I hope you enjoyed looking through this with me, and I hope that your own sketchbook practice, whatever it looks like, is going really well. Bye for now.